any great organization, any great business will recognize ultimately their best decisions and thinking and direction setting is going to happen when they are in tune, with nature, with the music of the universe. How do you get in tune with that? By creating quiet spaces, moments of reflection, walks in nature, mindfulness, meditation. There are limits to analytical thinking and to just human judgment, but there are no limits to being in tune and being guided by something more of collective consciousness.
I'm curious, what do you think business looks like? Let's say 200 years from now, the ratio is flipped and the vast majority of people are extremely thoughtful, extremely conscientious, extremely heart-centered, very attuned to things like energy and resonance and vibration and all this. What does business look like 200 years from now as that shift happens? And do you think that business needs to change for education to change, or that education needs to change for business to change? So it's kind of two questions.
Okay, great. No, very provocative. That makes me think. I think I'm going to use my 5 energies framework to answer what that future business state might look like. So to me, in that more idealized world, any business, every business would have a very clear, coherent purpose. And that purpose would be something that does advance, humanity in some beautiful way, that serves humanity in some beautiful way.
So like right now they have what are called B corporations, right?
Yes.
In other words, you're saying that essentially that becomes the norm.
That becomes the norm. I mean, we can come back and talk a little bit about sort of my, perspective on the ESG movement, environment, society, governance, and B Corps, because I do think some of it is being approached in a smart, thoughtful way. Some of it is still being approached in a little bit more limiting way. So maybe we can come back and talk about that. But fundamentally, to your point, right, there is in every business a conscientious commitment and interest in wanting to only do things which they believe will be in the ultimate service of humanity, not merely in the service of investor profit maximization. So I think that to me would be key. Now, that doesn't mean that it wouldn't be a profitable business. What it means is that rather than pursue purpose, because it will drive profits for you, which is how a little bit of the ESG movement is today being framed. That listen, do these things because it'll get your customers to be more loyal and society to be more supportive. And, governments are requiring this now and all of that stuff. So they're saying do all these things because actually it'll end up making you financially more successful. I would say the opposite will happen in that idealized future, where actually what you will say is, I am committed to making profits. I'm committed to making profits. So that doesn't go away. But I'm committed to making profits because the more profitable I am, the more I can live out my purpose. Yeah. So profits as an enabler of purpose rather than purpose as an enabler of profits. So I think that relationship will change. The second, I would say, is this wisdom idea. And wisdom to me is all about a questing to look for the truth in all situations. And today that often doesn't happen in our, corporate and other organizational environments. Oftentimes, certain truths are not expressed, certain ideas are shot down, certain people's voices are not heard, and you have an incomplete understanding of what's actually happening in the system. So a more wise organization is one that will know just what note to strike when, which people should speak up and lead the thinking forward and, kind of push ideas, et cetera. It doesn't always have to be the executives on the executive suite, because it might be the least tenured, younger most person who actually has so much more savviness in terms of what's actually happening in the world that you want to listen to her or to him, than others. So that capacity to actually create an environment which is very dynamic and which allows truth to emerge, that would be to me the second internal cultural aspect of it. The third would be the growth aspect, that these organizations in business would be constantly seeking to reinvent themselves, to evolve themselves, to never get too stuck in a certain fixed state. The malleability and that you talked, the pliability that you talked about, the creating a culture where there's feedback and there's constant evolution, experimentation. The fourth would be the love idea, which is that there's a sense of human connection, human bonds. I mean, I would argue that to an extent that we all see the people in our organization as part of our extended family.
Yeah.
I know some people like that and some don't. I like that idea that basically, you can, that doesn't mean you can't have hard conversations, doesn't mean you can't make tough decisions. We do that even in our families from time to time, but you feel that sense of kinship and connection and belonging with them. And the fifth and final is that all of this might be the most provocative, the one that's the biggest leap perhaps for some of our listeners. I don't know where you're going to fall on this, Jeff. So let me just put it out there. Although when you spoke about your practice of jazz and in the moment flow and all of that, maybe you relate to this. But the fifth one I want to offer to you is kind of a little bit mystical. And that's coming from the self-realization idea that any great organization, any great business will recognize ultimately tremendous challenge, complexity, change that is happening around them, and know that ultimately their best decisions and thinking and direction setting is going to happen when they are in tune. When they are in tune with nature, when they are in tune with the music of the universe, when they are in tune with what like a creative higher intelligence has in mind in terms of the blueprint for the advancement of the world. And by being in tune with that, how do you get in tune with that? By creating silent bonds, quiet spaces, moments of reflection, walks in nature, mindfulness, meditation, prayer for those who have a spiritual, path, they're drawn to a faith-based path. They're actively bringing that faith, that spirituality, that communion with nature, that respect and attunement with higher forces in the universe to bear in helping to unfold ideas, thoughts, instincts, intuitions, step by step, day by day, in a way that, can recognize that there are limits to analytical thinking and to just human judgment, but there are no limits to being in tune and being guided by something more of collective consciousness.
Man, so you have an illustrious resume, lots of amazing accomplishments. You used to work at McKinsey, am I right? So you were in consulting before you were in academia?
Yeah, well, I've intertwined between those two for a bit of time during my 20s, ultimately my early 30s. I was essentially drawn to arenas where there was a lot of intellectual ferment and, in a sense, like problem-solving challenges that one could take on. When I was a kid, I used to enjoy doing like maths, puzzle books kind of things. But on the other hand, I was also keen to want to do it in a way that I could experience a little bit like the tangible rewards, the outcomes, the social business impact. And so I was in academia because it was a place where one can, more in a pure way, just kind of organize ideas and thoughts and wrestle with issues intellectually without the messiness of like the real world. But on the other hand, I would get impatient there, and then I would go into the real world and work in consulting organizations, initially for a small boutique marketing consulting firm between my PhD and between my MBA and my PhD. Then coming back, finishing my PhD, and once I'd done that, then I realized, academic research and the pursuit of that kind of tenure track, like professor role, isn't really my calling. And so that's when I joined McKinsey.
Okay. And I love the way you said that, to pursue things in a more pure academic environment, but then and avoid all that messiness. But that messiness, that's kind of where all the action is, right? That's where the impact happens, is in the mess of actual human beings doing imperfect things. And I love that, because I feel like I live in the messiness. And sometimes I'm like, man, life would be a lot easier if I would just be a little more academic about all this. But, I like it. I like being out there on the front lines on YouTube, taking hits from the haters and coaching entrepreneurs, building, small businesses. And I don't know, it's fun. But, okay. So obviously you've ended up still in academia. So what do you kind of do now day to day? It seems like you kind of straddle both worlds, the academic and the more, ground game, if you will. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, after McKinsey, I went and did, a startup in Silicon Valley, and definitely got really, excited about entrepreneurship, innovation, getting new ideas and visions out there, and having some meaningful, fresh kind of impact in the world. And you, of course, do that a lot in the paths you've taken. And the pull that I then felt was that there was something missing to me in the equation of business. It was very, very rich in intellectual challenges and financial impact and all of that. but there was something else that was missing. And so I felt like all of me hadn't fully arrived yet, in the arena of life. And there was something more. And then I slowed life down in my early 30s, kind of like reconnected in some ways to my spiritual core, practices and community. And as I deepened a little bit that inner kind of engagement, with my connection with the universe, I found that the ideas started to emerge and bubble up for me that what I was really drawn to is to really mathematize, so to say, and study human potential, something which, of course, you and I are, commonly passionate about. And it was partly a quest to pursue that for myself. But then I felt very drawn to the idea of bringing it into the classroom and bringing it into executive arenas. So the worlds that I straddle now are that for the last 15 years at Columbia, I've been teaching this class, as you mentioned, which is really about like helping support our students to discover and advance their own potential as human beings and as leaders. And then, we've packaged that essentially as an institutional offering at Mentora Institute to offer to organizations to help advance their purpose, their people, their performance by building essentially great cultures and great leaders.
So you have a book that seems like kind of the distillation of a lot of what you're talking about. It's called Inner Mastery, Outer Impact. And I'm looking at the book over here, and it says how your 5 core energies hold the key to success. So this concept of energies, is that something that, first of all, is it roughly approximate the subject matter that you teach through the course at Columbia?
Yeah, the book is absolutely the framework. There's only so much one could codify and write in one book.
Right.
The publisher was definitely at some point like putting the box around like how many words and how many pages.
Yeah.
I respect very much. I respect that. It from your own writing this. And I have at the same time in the work that we do with our students at Columbia as well as at my institute, been able to develop some additional practical tools and practices for them to take on, which I didn't have the opportunity to kind of package into the book. But the essence of our philosophy, approach, our model, these 5 energies, yes, that's very much what the book is about. Okay,
so what is the course? What school at the university is the course taught in, and what category of course is it referenced as? I'm asking for a particular reason.
Sure. So it's the business school at Columbia University. So it's Columbia Business School. And within the business school, there are different departments, as you know, like finance and marketing. And then there's a department of management, and so that's where practices around strategy and management and what are the things you need to learn and do to advance that for yourself as MBA students. That's the department which this class is offering. Okay,
so I love this. This is encouraging to me. So on campus in the business school, at the prestigious university, Columbia University in management, which again, these are terms that have kind of a quantitative, almost like a sterility to, like they're sort of like mathematical and empirical, but like you're in there. Your 5 energies, if I'm reading it right, are purpose, wisdom, growth, love, and self-realization. Is that right?
Correct.
And so you're in Columbia Business School talking to students in a business environment, in a management context, about love and about purpose. I'm curious, did you have to work? Was there any work involved or any resistance that you faced getting these ideas into that environment? And then what is the response? Obviously, I know the response from the students, and it's a popular class, but how does everybody feel about it? In other words, you're kind of cutting against the grain of some stereotypes of what goes on in a business school. And I'm curious, like, what's the reality? What's the real story there?
Yeah, it's a good question to ask. And, it wasn't necessarily an automatic, door that was opened for me. I did have to initially really be very mindful about the environment I was in and what I was questing for and the different stakeholders and how to bring them along on their journey. Part of it was for me to actually pause for a bit and spend some time in absorbing the latest scientific evidence on what the discoveries are about human nature, and seeing how they're synced up with my own, in a sense, like inner beliefs and experiences, and finding the common ground between those, bringing in neuroscience and psychotherapy and psychology and other fact-based scientific discipline from today, to be able to prove to my colleagues at Columbia that, look, what I'm seeking to codify and bring here is in fact something that is very much emerging today in the scientific arena as proof points about what it takes for people to thrive, what it takes for people to be harmonious in relationships and be happy and be in peak performance mode. So that really helped them, knowing that Hitendra is definitely talking about a topic that hasn't had much treatment in the past in a traditional business school curriculum, but he's doing it from a lens that we all really trust and respect and appreciate. And yes, it is true that today the world is opening up to more of these deeper scientific advancements. Then, that was 15 years ago when I started. Then over the course of the last 15 years, as you notice as much as I, there's actually been a growing kind of respect and appreciation, openness, in business towards the idea of purpose being at the very core of a business, towards the idea of, the empathetic leader and human-centered leadership, and the idea of bringing a whole person's self, right, into work. And so the task has been increasingly easier for me. I'm swimming less upstream now, with this.
Yeah.
I'm somewhat cautious, about how to land people just the right way, how to meet them where they are. This notion of love that you talk about is something that some organizations are just embracing. They love that theme and idea. And others, you have to open them up to the fact that, look, let's define love, right? Almost mathematically. And love is about taking joy in other people's joy and finding success in other people's success. That's when your heart is expanded. And you do that, when you have a child, or when you actually have a friend you care about, their joy becomes your joy. Their success becomes yours. Why would you not want that from a manager or an executive, that actually the team that they're engaging with, the organization they're engaging with, the clients and customers they're serving in the world, the community they're a part of, that they should operate with that attunement to having the joy of the collective be their joy. And then all the things you want from a good manager, that they should be a people developer oriented person, very compassionate and kind, attuned to the emotional energy in the room, and all of that. All of those things you're looking for in a manager actually turns out to be the natural expression at times of this love-based energy. So with a little bit of education and care and thought, I'm starting to find that more and more, just leaders and organizations today are starting to open themselves up.
Yeah. So I'm curious, and I love that you're doing what you're doing, because I have such a strongly positive opinion about capitalism and the free markets and business and entrepreneurship. And I think there's a very artificial dichotomy in the society between our professional lives and our personal lives. And I believe very much in an approach to business that's holistic and really supportive of the whole person blossoming, whether you're at the top, middle, or bottom of an organization. I just sort of intrinsically believe that business can be a really powerful and positive growth engine for human beings. But I find as a practical reality that is a very unusual and to some degree unpopular viewpoint. And it's a conversation. And I'll give you an example. The reason I'm looking down off to the side here, I'm looking at my phone. And if you're hearing this on podcast, you can't see that I'm looking off to the side here. But I have for example, a YouTube video that I posted a couple days ago that's called How Capitalism Could Save the World. And it's a little 60-second YouTube short, but it kind of references this same idea, right? That you can create an energy inside of a for-profit company where people are aligned and people are on mission and people are thriving, and it can be this wonderful thing, right? And the comments that I get, and my social media team has deleted some of the most offensive comments, but for example, short-term profit above all else, because I was talking in the short about the difference between stakeholder capitalism and shareholder capitalism and not managing to quarterly earnings numbers, basically. And they said, short-term profit above all else is the very foundation of capitalism, and any attempts to make it anything else will fail over time. And again, that was one of the more PG commentaries. I remember somebody else said, capitalism is all about masters and slaves. And if the slaves ever revolt, then the masters will fail. And that was sort of the general zeitgeist of the responses or the comments. And that's, I've been doing this for 4 years now. I've been evangelizing entrepreneurship. And I get the sense that there is an upswelling of really negative energy around the idea that business is anything other than just like imperialist oppression of the otherwise good people of the world. So that was a long-winded setup. How do you feel like, where do you feel like we are as a society? And you're on an Ivy League campus, right? I don't know how much do you feel like you get a fair representation, and like, where do you really think we are as a society? And how acceptable are these ideas to people that like business can be this place for like holistic and even spiritual wonder and cool things to happen? And it's not just like transactional and negative all the time.
Yeah, thank you for opening us up to this reflection. I applaud you for the ideas and positivity you have about the role of entrepreneurship and business, in the best versions of those things.
Right.
And like anything else in the world, there's always a spectrum, and there's always good cases and bad cases. And I think we can see that in business, and when you look at what a disaster it's been in the opioid crisis, what happens when business goes wrong, then one can empathize a little bit with those critics of capitalism. But on the other hand, hey, listen, all of us today have been beneficiaries of the system, whether it is the kind of healthcare that we live with, the kind of comforts we have at home, the food that we access, from the supply chain of food. We are all benefiting from some of the more virtuous aspects of the capitalist system that we are intentionally choosing, unless we seek to escape from the world and go and, into some, Amazonian,
right,
fully removed from the world kind of place. We are all benefiting from some of those, revolutions that capitalism has brought to the world to create affordable, scalable access to all kinds of comforts and pleasures and, all of that, right? And so to that end, for those of us who are protesting against it, I would both, on the one hand, applaud them for the quest they're on to want to question and challenge the dark underbelly of capitalism, and want to look for ways to kind of alert us to fix those and to not make profit such a corrupting motive, for organizations and individuals, and to police that and to kind of correct that. And at the same time, I would want to also open them up, just like you are, to the recognition that, actually speaking, the discipline of needing to be able to take whatever energies and talents and visions and efforts that you have and package them into forms of service to society, that you will get a signal back from the world as to whether they are appreciating what you're doing for them or not. And that signal is their willingness to pay for your product, right? And pay for your service, and to actually give you their loyalty versus somebody else who may also be seeking to serve a similar need, right? So you get this reality check, which sometimes you don't get in some of the other, spheres of human pursuit, look at government, look at nonprofits, look at education. They're beautiful and noble in their own right at their core in terms of what officially they're meant to do. But sometimes without that market signal, people get complacent, people get bureaucratic, people get political, and you kind of lose the essence of what it is that you, and the purity of what it is you were going to do there. So I do think, to your point, that some of the, Adam Smith, kind of free market, kind of invisible hand kind of ideas of survival of the fittest actually, pushes those of us in business to take a very disciplined approach to how we organize and how we attune ourselves to the need of the marketplace, and how we produce and how we innovate and how we collaborate and all of that. And those can be, to your point, I think, very character building practices. Now, it is still our responsibility as entrepreneurs, as leaders, as individuals, professionals or others in these organized business communities. It is our responsibility to make sure we take all of this in the direction of good and not in the direction of bad, that we are not pandering to people's worst instincts, to get addicted to certain things and make them really unhealthy with the offerings we put out there and destroy the environment, but to actually, really appeal to the, to the higher kind of, instincts and needs and hungers, which rightfully so are there in society. And there's so many great, products and services that capitalism has put out there that speak to that. And so as long as we're doing that, I think it can be a very character building thing to have that kind of discipline, have that market kind of reality that you're always facing every quarter, and approach, this quest with that kind of higher intent of wanting to do it in the service of.
Is your course taught at the undergraduate or graduate level?
It's at the graduate level. Columbia doesn't have as much of a undergraduate program in business.
Okay.
So by default, our students are typically in the late 20s and then all the way into even their 40s or 50s. We have an MBA program. We have an executive MBA program. Okay. Typically, those students are a little bit, on the older side than the MBAs. And then we have executive education, where we teach, just executives coming from organizations, sometimes for a few days and sometimes, a few times over the course of six months. And that's executive education. And so I've had the privilege of teaching at Columbia, typically students in the late 20s all the way into the 50s or early 60s. More recently, I have started through my institute a foundation now as a 501(c) nonprofit called Mentora Foundation. And I'll tell you why I'm sharing that. And our commitment at the foundation is to help support, working towards building change makers, like a global fellowship of change makers who'd be really committed not just to creating a more prosperous world on the inside, but also a very principled world. Not just a prosperous world on the outside, but a very principled world also on the inside in terms of strong social and mental and moral fabrics and people being inspired by the Mother Teresas and the Mandelas and the Gandhis. What does it take to actually help shift people's hearts and minds and advance their values in society? And so this foundation, the first program that we just launched in our inaugural year this year, has been a youth changemaker fellowship where we brought in college students who applied and then were qualified and got scholarships, a certain select number of them, but about 18 of them, of which 16 have now made it to the next phase. And so these are college kids, and so these are in the 18 to 22 year age group. And this is in a sense like my first extension into working with that demographic from these older students in the past. But it's been a tremendous reward and joy to see how much potential we have in helping to activate and support this pursuit of human potential and growth and impact in the world and in the youth as well.
That's so cool. The reason I was asking about graduate versus undergraduate, so is it sounds like, everybody that you're teaching is somebody that if it's at the graduate level, it's somebody that's fundamentally decided, like they're not just trying out business education, they've committed to it. They've decided that this is a direction they're going to go. So, and I was curious sort of, well, I guess it doesn't matter because you're not talking to, call them, wide-eyed freshmen, but I'm curious then, like, do you notice a distinction in terms of the receptivity to, again, these seem like sort of non-traditional business concepts, right? Purpose, love, growth, wisdom, self-realization, but much more, stuff you'd find in psychology department than a business school, right? But do you find that in the 40 and even 50-year-old crowd that there's almost like you're serving like feeding a starving audience, that they're like, man, I've been in the business world now for 20 years or 30 years even, and I've been longing for this conversation in the context of business, and now finally I'm getting it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I might sort of roughly divide the people, the audiences that I've had the privilege of bringing this to, both at Columbia and then in our work with organizations at Mentora Institute, most of whom are Fortune 500 companies. In some cases, we've been working also with leaders in the education sector and in nonprofits. But just broadly speaking, right? Maybe like a 30-40-30 is what I would say. What that means is about 30% of the people, lap this up, kind of like what you're saying, which is like, yeah. Oh, wow. I always have been interested in this. Part of me has been pursuing this in my own private kind of journey. And now I'm getting a language and a bridge through which to actually more openly engage on this topic, even in the workplace. And so Yeah, and so that is the most immediate, kind of, I think, obviously audience that just kind of grabs this. Then you have another 40% where with some little bit of care and thought, from our side, me and other faculty, and also with with the discipline of meeting people where they are, talking about these ideas and thoughts in a way that is accessible to them, that has proof points associated with it, that gives them some limited experiences around this, that shows them examples of stories and case studies, etc. You start winning them over. They start to realize and see, especially in a time like today, where there's so much creative ferment today, that people are just being shaken up and woken up to need to actually open their eyes, right, to things that they may not have in the past. They're just a little bit more open today. So I think we get that other 40% that way. And then the other 30%, some of that is just organizations who are just not invested in this right now. And so we may not be able to get them to really support and sponsor and, journeys like this for their people. And then some of that is just individuals who just, for a variety of reasons, may feel like they have a certain system through which they have operated in their life, and maybe it has already, gotten them to a good enough place. They don't feel the need to expand their horizons, or they feel very bitter, about certain things not, being right in the culture or the world, that they don't feel the need to turn the lens within because they feel all the fixing needs to happen on the outside, right? And so for a certain number of people, for a certain number of organizations, this may not be right. But I am increasingly, inspired to see what a large cross-section of people today are starting to get opened up to this. Now, the real challenge to me lies after you open them up. How do you sustain, that journey for yourself, and then how do you help support others to sustain the journey for themselves? Because at one point I realized in my teaching that, wow, I can offer up something and feel very satisfied at the end with the feedback and the, thank yous and, the just the expressions of gratitude from people. But that's kind of like a Broadway show,
Right.
You give people like a spark, a moment of inspiration, a fond memory. But like 2 years later, fundamentally, are they different people, having gone to the Broadway show, right? Like that's a question we can all ask of ourselves. And so I was like, Hitendra, you got to, before you retire, you got to figure out like some way to make more permanent, sustainable, measurable changes, to people to really feel like you're serving society, in the ways you wanted to. And so that's been my quest over the last about 6-8 years, is to really come up with new innovations, new ideas. You talked about the flight simulator thing. That's an example of that. There are a couple of other innovations like that we're doing as a way to help people build habits, and through repetitive practice, get to a place where there's some real regrooving of their brains. So,
regrooving of their brains. Thank you. I'm glad you said. I love that. I literally, I feel like I spend like a great number of hours every day trying to keep my brain good and squishy so that it's easy to carve new grooves in it. I just, the idea of like a sclerotic, rigid brain that with no suppleness, it just terrifies me. Like I'm gonna get old and irrelevant. But anyway,
what's one way that you do that you can share with me and your audience, to keep the brain in that sort of more fungible state?
Yeah. So I was a pianist, a professional jazz musician in my 20s. And I still maintain a pretty disciplined practice of playing 45 to 60 minutes every morning. And I kind of cover the gamut of different things that I do musically, but a big part of it, I would say probably 20 to 30% of it is completely spontaneous freeform improvisation. To where I really focus not on creating, but on getting out of the way and simply functioning as a conduit to whatever the universal musical intelligence is out there, that it can just flow right through me. And that's one thing as an example. I'm very into pliability of all sorts, mental and physical. I stretch a lot. I have this vision of wanting to be like a very sort of fluid, malleable person. So I stretch my mind, I stretch my body, I stretch in any way I can.
I love that. I love that. I love that. I mean, one of my core thrusts, very analogous to yours, is on this whole kind of question about personality, and we in the 20th century made some great advancements in our understanding of human nature. And a lot of that led to these personality types, kind of research and these assessment tools. And I have like almost always rebelled against those. I always felt like, wait a second, it's too limiting to put myself in this box or that box or that box. It's helpful a little bit, to understand myself and others through that lens. But you can also run the risk of getting yourselves too rigidly identified, and so it's been very rewarding, actually. I put a little bit of that in the book, in the growth chapter, Living with Growth chapter, where today there is some contrarian science that is emerging, which is what the way science works, in general, that you have a certain wave and a certain idea, that is put out there. And then 100 years later, some people come out with like a contrarian new thought. And after a while it gains momentum, and suddenly you challenge the science of the past with the science of today. And, and the science of tomorrow will challenge today's science. But one of these newer kind of themes in science is this notion that any or all of us actually have multiple personalities, not in a way which is like, schizophrenic or something. Right. It's just like multiple personalities, as in we are one way in one situation with one individual, but we can be another way in another situation with another individual. And I love that, that, like you said, pliability, in our nature, to be able to be, I like to call it like everything and the complete opposite. It just depends when and where, that would be the ideal. If you can just be exactly the right way with the right person at the right time based on what's needed, in that moment.
Yeah, I'm actually, I don't know, we may be veering into nebulous territory here, but I don't know. I always think podcasting is about having the conversations that we want to have. And then if people are interested, they'll listen, right? I'm actually reading a book by a guy named Sir Ian McGilchrist, who's a neuroscientist. And it's about, he's a researcher in brain hemispheres, which it's interesting to hear how much sort of his contemporaries sort of discouraged and almost resisted his emphasis on hemispheric brain science, because it's kind of viewed as almost pseudoscience, or it was, until he almost legitimized it. But anyway, the book is called The Master and His Emissary, and it's talking about the relationship between the left brain and the right brain. And I think that there's kind of a correlation with what you're talking about. And it was so fascinating to me to think about. He sort of juxtaposed the left brain and the right brain, where he said, think about it this way. We must simultaneously eat and not be eaten. Like, that's how we survive. We have to be able to eat, and we have to not be able to not get eaten by something else that wants to eat us. And so the left brain is essentially designed to focus on a thing, whether it's a cube of cheese or a rabbit in the jungle. In other words, focus so that we can kill it and eat it, or get it and eat it. And the right brain is meant to maintain contextually aware, so that if something else's left brain is trying to focus on us, we're able to sort of see behind ourselves, so to speak, right? And that's actually why we have this abstract creative right brain and this linear focused left brain, right? And in terms of what you're talking about, I think about it as kind of calibrating. The left brain is like a targeting device, and it can hone in on whatever it needs to, but it can be sighted. It can be sighted to shoot from 2 miles away or 20 feet away. And it can be optimized for different interactions and different, like you say, different environments, different relationships, different contexts as needed. But in a sense, to me, our truth is our right brain, and the left brain is just a tool. And so I like to think of personality to some degree as a tool that our left brain can harness to a purpose. And that doesn't feel inauthentic to me, because my right brain is actually where my truth lives, if that makes sense. And I don't know, I haven't actually shared that theory with anyone yet, but you've created the space for it. So thank you for letting me air it out. But anyway, I love what you're saying. And I just love this holistic approach to business. And I love the idea of business as a crucible in which to work on ourselves.
Yes.
So that we can be better at business, but also at life.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, you mentioned 30, 40, 30. So do you think it's fair to say that in corporate America, roughly maybe 2/3 of all people think that the stuff that we're talking about is somewhere on the spectrum of silliness. Maybe they're enrollable, maybe they're not, but then maybe there's 1/3 that's like, oh yeah, that's awesome. I want that. I think that's valid in the context of business.
I have to say that I'm constantly getting amazed at the openness, in audiences to relate to some of these ideas and messages.
Okay.
And to that end, I am aspirational and hopeful that the target is a moving target, and that more and more people are starting to get themselves opened up to some of these kinds of ideas. Okay, let me explain it this way. So, in the year 1800, 15% of the people in the world were literate, 85% illiterate, right? So 15% knew how to do reading, writing, arithmetic. Today, the numbers are reversed. 85% literate, 15% illiterate, right? Now, why were only 15% literate, right, in the year 1800? If you were to ask those 15%, why are the other people not able to do all this stuff? They would tell you, oh, it's very complicated. It requires like abstract manipulations of symbols and stuff. This is very, very advanced stuff.
Right.
It's not really a general human quality. It's something which a privileged few, right? In their case, there might be the aristocrats and the blue blood and whatever, and they're like superior in some ways as a species or as a gender or whatever, right? And of course, today we will laugh at them and say like, you are so limited in your way of thinking about human potential, because actually the methods and tools and access points hadn't been developed to open and train others on being literate. And once over the last 200 years, we've had revolutions into democratizing education, in advancing the practices of how to actually teach, reading, writing, arithmetic. Suddenly you're finding that actually pretty much every human being can know it. And the 15% who don't, we feel pain for them, because we know that in their case, it was a lack of, basic privilege, and almost like a human right today. And so I just wonder if some of the things that we're talking about here, this notion of really activating a heart-based quality, attuning yourself to the emotional state, in the room, having a quest and a capacity to rise above circumstances and have that resilience, to be really infused with a deep sense of purpose, inspire people from the inside out, like by activating what I call like the inner core. Maybe these are just like strengths that, we might think that there are just a few extraordinary people who have them, as leaders, or, at times as members of our community, or a certain parent who's just, so much more effective in the way they nurture and develop their kids versus others. But maybe these are just things which we just need to decode, and we need to find a way to systematize and then create access points for society. And as long as the interest and the hunger is there in society to take these on, maybe we'll find that pretty much everybody, has that latent potential. And so to me, like when I do keynotes and when I do, certain kind of like large scale programs where I do see in front of me a cross section of a global population of folks in business, right? With no differentiation in terms of like, these are predominantly people of a certain race or gender or, ethnicity or nationality. No, it is a cross section. And when I find that resonance happening with that, cross section, then I start to feel like, oh, wow. There is almost like a universal potential and universal hunger, and something has been stirred today. Now, it might be, to your point, that a third of them actually can stay on with it, and so the others might lose the motivation. But something in that moment awakens them to something that has always been part of them. That's
right. Well, it's in there. If we're born, we have these traits, right? I'm so inspired by what you're saying, and I'll just share very briefly that. So our company Entra, we are very, very much along these lines. I've really tried to fashion Entra to be an incubator, almost an experiment in capitalism. And a large, it's funny, like our customers, they come to us because of what's in it for them. Just like every customer, right? And in our case, we're an alternative education platform where people want to grow professionally, but they like the fact that we also allow them to grow personally while they grow professionally, right? That's kind of our USP. It's hybrid of personal and professional development in a pretty unique way, which frankly, it sounds like Mentora Institute is too, right? So like I said from the beginning, I think we're very aligned. But I also have this less discussed, almost ulterior motive, which is I want to prove something to the marketplace. And one of my intentions is to build a billion-dollar unicorn startup without ever taking any venture capital or private funds. I started the company 4 years ago on a $20,000 credit card. And, if in the next 3 to 5 years, if I'm able to build a $1 billion enterprise valuation, that's going to be a pretty amazing story of some guy that started on a 20K credit card and built a $1 billion company. And they will say, how did he do it? And if they come look under the hood, they're going to see all the stuff you're talking about. They're going to see the focus on alignment. They're going to see the focus on energy. They're going to see what we call the infinite game bias, which is a term we borrowed from Simon Sinek, that like you will find significant inflection points in our journey where we did things that were negative profit decisions in the short term because the infinite game demanded that we do it that way. But here's my experience of it. First of all, one of the reasons I won't raise money is because then I would invite in less pure lines of thought that I would have a fiduciary responsibility to be less pure about what I'm trying to do, because I would have to respect their point of view. And there's a lot more of them than there are guys like us, right? So that's part of what I'm trying to do. But my daily experience of living it through a for-profit venture is that it requires a huge amount of faith. Faith, to quote the Bible, and we're not an overtly religious organization in any way. I mean, we're completely open and accepting of anybody. But I'm not going to hide the fact that for me, every day I have to wake up for and say, okay, faith is the substance of what it is that I'm hoping for. It is my certainty of that which I do not yet see. That's Hebrews 11:1. I have to live in faith every day. Otherwise, there is really no way to justify some of the decisions I make and some of the directions that I lead us in, because viewed through the short-term profit motive lens, it would beg different decisions and different strategies. And so everybody at Entra is kind of hitched their wagon to this big visionary experiment. And I'm very confident in where we're headed. But I only have that luxury because we're a private company. We're not traded on the public markets. We don't have any private equity or venture capital investors. We don't even have a board. And so I'm sort of but we're getting big. I mean, we're a 250 person company now. And it's like, okay, I'm kind of getting to the point where a lot of there's a lot of arguments that could be made for me to kind of broaden my willingness to get other people involved, whether it's starting a board or talking to, maybe get some growth capital. But I'm like ideologically terrified that somebody's going to come in and try to change this thing. So what would you say to someone like me who's like, yeah, I want to do it this way, but I don't see the market as really supporting me quite yet?
First of all, congratulations on what you're doing. I love the alignment that we have in what it is that, could be a meaningful service, to those out there who are seeking to learn and grow, and harmonize their personal and professional paths and all of that. We're so aligned, like you said, and kudos to you for what you've conceived and put out there. The fact that you're also, being so successful at it. I mean, if you've got 250 people, I can only imagine how you have, gone through some stages of growth and that too in a very short period of time. So kudos to you on that. I have mixed feelings about the investor kind of part. I mean, I think there are situations where it can be very rewarding. They can bring a lot of, mentoring and networks and guidance and, financial support at a time where, it just would be hard to kind of go through the scaling cycle by yourself if you really, do need capital for it. So I can respect the logic of that being a key like market force out there, whether it's venture capital, private equity, loans from banks and other things. At the same time, kind of like you, I've taken that path at Mentora Institute as well, and I did it from day one, just like you, for exactly the same philosophy you shared, which is like, I'm trying to build this to last. I want to build this to last, beyond my own life and leave a positive legacy, create the next, generation of people who carry this on. And I really don't want to get distracted by the motive of short-term financial returns, in particular around, investment partners who want to, make it go public or, sell this to another organization and all of that. So I just didn't want any of that noise, in the system. And so to your point, I mean, I've also sought to really grow this organically, just self-funded at whatever pace. And to your point about faith, I love that. I mean, I think the important thing, if you take that faith-based approach, which I'm sure you know as much as I, is like one has to really strive to keep one's intentions really pure, and to almost approach it from a place of surrender, so that one is constantly striving to put the ego aside, to put one's own personal, limiting beliefs aside, and open oneself up for whatever it is that perhaps a higher force may direct one to do in the service of whatever its blueprint is, for where it wants to take humanity. And so you're just striving to be in tune. You're striving to keep your intentions pure. You're constantly, in a sense, seeking to surrender. And at the same time, fiercely pursue, right? But zest, because you're part of this army that is out there to help support and serve, this higher cause, right? And so, yes, you want to go out there and fight the good fights, but not from a place of I want to one up the competition. One of the things that I do in my organization, I don't know if this, would appeal to you, Jeff, is I tell people, we have no competition. There's no such, because anybody who's actually, taking, in a sense, business away from us, it's because they're serving the need, for our audience that we want to serve. And so how can we not be anything but thankful to them for serving that need in a good way? Because after all, that's what we want to do. We are here because we want to serve that need, right? And so they're not competitors, they're our peers. The only competition we have is those people who are, or organizations who are trying to pull people down, who are trying to take people in opposite direction from you. But those who are trying to take them the same direction, anyway. So I think the possibilities are tremendous in the world today to fuse more of these kind of faith-based kind of aspirations, into business. It's been done in some ways, over the last century by certain people quietly in their own pursuits as well. Kudos to you for what you run.
Do you see any large companies, let's say Fortune 500 size companies are there any in particular that stand out to you? And I want to be clear for the audience and for anybody, when I say faith-based, I don't mean rooted in a particular faith or religious organization. I just mean operating from sort of a metaphysical or spiritual openness that there is a supernatural process that I can trust as part of my decision making that is not purely ones and zeros. That's really all I mean. And are there any companies that you feel like really exemplify this at a large scale? Because I'm thinking, man, it would be really hard to maintain this sort of purity at a 10,000 person organization level. And I'm wondering if there are any companies you see doing it.
Yeah. I mean, one that I've come into contact with recently, and I just love the story, is actually a multi-generational family in the retail sector coming out from Switzerland called the Cofra Group. COFRA. And they are today in a whole variety of businesses besides retail, including real estate and asset management and, renewable energy, among other things. But this is an organization that has, I think, very strong Christian roots. And at the same time, like you were saying, they embrace and welcome people from all faiths and beyond faith, as well. And so, but their Christian roots, really guide them towards the kind of values they want to foster in the organization and the kind of, work they want to do in the community, including the kind of businesses that they want to offer up there. So that's one example. I think, if you look at Herb Kelleher and what he was doing when he started Southwest and for many decades advanced it, or, the Butt family and what they've done with a company like HEB, also a very storied name in Texas. Texans will know this name really well. Beyond Texas, you may not, but it's like the most dominant retail chain in Texas. Or what I see, Brian Chesky do at Airbnb. These are people and cultures where they may not necessarily have a very strong, if you want to call it kind of engagement with the idea of faith or God or anything. but I feel they're in some ways like deeply spiritual in their values, the attunement with, kind of like higher causes, the need to desire to serve, be really connected with their community, make profit be something that, emerges from rather than is the first and direct obsession of, the work they do and all of that.
Mm-hmm. So I have to share, when I was a pianist in my 20s, I'm from Houston, Texas, and I actually used to play gigs for Charles Butt.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah, in my book, I write about this period in my 20s when I used to play piano I played for multiple billionaires in their homes, and he was one of them. So,
wow, it's a small world. I've had the privilege of meeting him and serving his organization, HEP, and so it's a small world.
That's crazy. And they have some of the nicest grocery stores, man. I love going back to Houston and going to HEB Central Market, getting lunch. It's great.
It's such a great story. And I really feel at some level, it's a proof point of what we're talking.
That's what I want. I'm thinking about the audience. I'm thinking about the larger impact. Like what's the point of two guys talking about this stuff, right? If we can just inspire a little bit of optimism in the world, that like there is, like you said, an ethical, sustainable, faithful, thoughtful, mindful approach to capitalism, where you really can have your cake and eat it too. You can have a ton of profitability wrapped inside a ton of purpose, and capitalism can sort of reestablish itself as the greatest force for good that the world has ever known. I just think it's gotten such a bad rap lately.
And again, I mean, you and I both know that it's doing beautiful things, and it's also reaching certain limits to the current way it's doing things. So if we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right, but we refine it, right, and in some ways reform it, right, while also honoring what it is that it's doing, that's certainly the path that energizes me,
Yeah, I feel the same way. Listen, Hitendra, I know I've kept you over. You may have had you might be like late for a meeting and like stewing inside. So I'm going to say this. Thank you so much. This has been such a stimulating conversation. How can the audience go get more of you in their world?
My accountant was just reaching out, reminding me that today's the last day to do the filing of taxes or something. Oh yeah. I talked to mine this morning. Yeah. No, thank you for asking. There's my personal website, hitendra.com. So that's HITENDRA.com. I welcome any of your listeners there. You can sign up for my newsletter. I send a short little inspirational thing out once a week. There is, if you're interested in the work we do for organizations, then I would welcome you to the Mentora Institute website. That's just mentora.institute, MENTORA, mentora.institute. I talked about Mentora Foundation as well. That's mentora.foundation. And then my book, as you've shared, is Inner Mastery, Outer Impact, available, for the most part in Amazon and beyond. And very grateful for this time with all of you who are listening. All the best to you in your pursuit of success and happiness in both life and at work. And to you, Jeff, again, just hats off. I find it very inspiring to see all the very diverse and beautiful paths you've taken, how you bring them all together and into a place from where you can do such beautiful service, to the world. So thank you for having me.
If you loved that episode, then you're definitely going to love this one. Check it out.
There is a thread that is the common theme of everything in your life, and it is what you might call your purpose. It is what drives you at a deepest possible level. And so catching that thread gives you access to your emotional source code.